My marriage to Gwen needed a boost. Our fourth marriage anniversary was approaching, and something had changed over the past few months. The changes coincided with Gwen's recent promotion to project manager, when she took on an important assignment after her boss went on leave following a heart attack. She had a lot of responsibility, and her usually barely controlled OCD had become active. Gwen began to spend more and more time in the office, and our time together decreased accordingly. At first, Gwen seemed to appreciate the little things I did to ease her stress: foot massages, keeping the house clean, and doing laundry. Then, about 6 weeks after her promotion, none of that mattered anymore. My touches became unwanted. My remarks made in an attempt to support her were rejected. I lived with a stranger and was on the verge of despair. In discussing this with friends who had been married for a long time, especially those who knew Gwen and me as a loving couple, they were all surprised by my experiences. My friend Paul's comment was typical. Les, this is hard to believe. Every couple goes through a temporary downturn. But you and Gwen have only been married for 4 years. This shouldn't happen for at least another 3 years. Are you sure you're not imagining things? When I told Paul that Gwen and I hadn't made love in over 3 weeks, he was surprised. When I mentioned some of her recent remarks, he went from surprised to amazed and went into male model. Maybe she's cheating on you. I don't see how or when. She works like a bee in the office. She is responsible for the transition to a new platform. The project is completely on her shoulders, from A to Z. This is a decisive moment in her career, and Gwen is too focused on her career and goal-oriented to miss your chance by hiding in some secluded place with your lover. Well, apparently that's the reason. Kid, your wife has this stressful project that's consuming her, and you're becoming collateral damage. I thought about it, but something still doesn't seem right. Paul looked into the bottom of his beer glass. I knew him well enough to read his mind. He was thinking, should I get another one or go home to my wife and kids? I saw his face light up with a small smile as he made his decision, then waved to the bartender to close the tab. Paul loves his family. After paying the bill, he gave me one last piece of advice. Let me tell you one thing, Les, don't do anything stupid by blaming Gwen for anything, especially if her only fault is working late under stress to get this project done. There's nothing worse than an unsupportive spouse. Don't be like that. Guy. The stranger sitting on the other side of me must have heard Paul's last comment. I could barely make out what he said to himself. There's nothing worse than an unsupportive spouse except a cheating spouse. I decided to try to trust but verify. For example, the following Saturday, when Gwen had to spend the day at the office installing new equipment, I called her in the middle of the day and asked if I could bring pizza for lunch. Gwen's response, "Oh, Les, that would be so nice of you, but can you have 3 large pizzas? There are 4 of us here, and we're all starving." I took the pizza order and drove to her office to deliver them. Gwen introduced me to 2 guys I had never met before. I already knew Janice from the last New Year's party. 2 guys, Brad and Clark, were recently hired. The 5 of us sat and ate pizza. The conversation was casual, although Brad was noticeably silent, but I got used to it when communicating with techies. Without being too obvious, I did my best to check in on how Gwen was spending her time away from home. Without a doubt, she spent all her time on this project. I never caught her off guard. 3 weeks later, I was sitting at home waiting for Gwen. I haven't found the slightest hint of any inappropriate behavior on her part, but we still haven't reconnected emotionally or physically. I decided to take a different approach. Dinner was simmering on the stove, a bottle of Merlot was steeping, and the table was set, including candles and a small vase of irises. It was 7:30 when Gwen walked through the door. Gwen looked at the table and stood stunned for a moment, then smiled, kissed me, and took off her coat and shoes. "Forrest, that's so cute." I poured her a glass of wine. "Wash up and change clothes. Dinner will be ready in 10 minutes. Then we need to talk." She looked at me, the wheels in her head turning. When Gwen came down, dinner was served. Medallions, fried potatoes, and asparagus. We ate while discussing our day. With the last bite, Gwen sat back in her chair and couldn't wait any longer. "What is this about, Les?" I took out the envelope and opened it. "Gwen, I know how hard these 5 months have been for you, and I know your conversion date is in 2 weeks, on Saturday. I think we need to spend time together after your conversion. Considering you'll want to stay close at the very least 2 weeks after the conversion, I've booked us a week's holiday starting in a month. We have 24 hours to say yes or no. If I don't cancel by 4 tomorrow, we'll lose 25% of the deposit." I showed Gwen a brochure for a Caribbean resort. "Our flight is first class to the Dominican Republic, a couple's resort, all inclusive." I sat back and watched Gwen as she alternated between looking at me and flipping through the brochure. After a long minute, she spoke. There were tears in her eyes. "Les, this is wonderful. I would love to go on vacation with you. The timing is perfect. Everything should be settled by the time we leave." Gwen stood up and sat on my lap, wrapping her arms around my neck. "Thank you for this." She kissed me. The next 4 weeks dragged on forever. GWN's project went into effect, the conversion was successful, and minor difficulties after the conversion were easily resolved. Gwen and I started making love again. Not twice a day like before, but during those 4 weeks we did it at least once a week. I parked my car in a remote lot, and we took the shuttle to the terminal. All we had with us were 2 small suitcases, my backpack and her purse. I didn't plan on wearing anything other than shorts, polos, and swim shorts for the entire week. Gwen had 3 summer dresses, 2 pairs of shorts, a couple of cute tops, and 2 of the sexiest bikinis imaginable in her carry-on luggage. It was supposed to be a hot week. We received our boarding passes and were standing in line at Shaw First Class when a familiar face approached us. Gwen looked shocked and perhaps spoke louder than she intended. "Brad, what are you doing here?" "I need to talk to you, Gwen." I was annoyed, thinking it was some kind of work problem. "Can't this wait until Gwen gets back from vacation?" Brad ignored me. "Gwen, we need to talk now." I was about to say something else, but Gwen interrupted me. She looked upset and worried. "Les, please go ahead. I'll handle everything and I'll be right behind you. It'll only take a few minutes." I hesitated. Gwen said it again. "Please, Les, just go. I'll be right behind you." She turned to Brad, looking incredibly angry. I thought that if I stayed, it would only delay what she wanted to say. I looked at my watch and went through security. When I arrived at our gate, the plane had already begun landing. I needed a drink, I knew where to get it, and I made the second biggest mistake of my life. I walked down the first-class hallway, showed my boarding pass, walked up the jet bridge, and sat down in my seat. When the flight attendant approached me, I didn't even give her a chance to speak. "Hello, can I have a double bourbon, neat?" I must have said it nicely because the young lady was back with my drink in less than 30 seconds. I thanked her before taking a long sip, the drink warming my throat, instantly transmitting a wave of calm to my body and brain. The last passengers were boarding. I took out my phone to call Gwen. No answer. Went to voicemail. I sent a message. "Where are you?" Nothing. I sent a second message. "You're late. Where are you?" I was so engrossed in my phone that I didn't notice the cabin door closing. My body felt the movement of the plane. We were leaving the terminal. At the same time, my phone beeped a message. It was from Gwen, and she simply wrote, "I'm so sorry." The flight attendant stood next to me. "Sir, you will have to turn off your phone." Her voice brought me out of my stupor. "Can I come out? This is an emergency." "What kind of emergency?" "My wife. She missed her plane. I think she left me." "Sorry, sir. We can't return to the terminal because of this. Think about the other passengers, please. Any delay will affect them." My look must have expressed my helpless state, because she handed me a small bottle of bourbon before beginning the safety demonstration. 5 long hours later, the plane landed at Punta Cana Airport in the Dominican Republic. As soon as possible, I called Gwen's number. Of course, she didn't answer why anything had to go right. When I hung up, I noticed a missed call from her, and I had a voicemail. It sounded like she was crying. It took me 2 tries to figure it out. Les, I'm so sorry, but if you read the letter I sent you, it will explain everything. I'm sorry for choosing such a cowardly path. You deserve better. That's all. I connected to email using my phone. The plane was ready to disembark. What terrible timing. I left the plane, sat down as soon as I could, and read Gwen's letter. Forrest, I'm sorry. I thought we could move away together and start over. For the last 4 months, before you suggested we move away together, I had an affair with Brad. The letter continued. Gwen alternated between apologies, justifications, and descriptions of what happened, why, to whom, and for how long. I sat reading the note, trying to control myself. I probably didn't handle it very well. When I finally got up and walked through customs, something about my appearance must have alerted the customs officer. Before I knew it, I was sitting in a small room with my luggage and 2 agents. Luckily, one of the agents spoke fluent English, and I was eventually able to convince him to read my wife's Dear John letter to understand why I looked like a lost soul. Is there anything worse than a pathetic jerk who's just been outed as a cuckold? The looks I received were terrible, but I didn't cry, trying to act brave. I was released within an hour. I walked out at dusk and took the shuttle to the resort. By this time, it was almost 8 in the evening. I needed a drink and a bed. The blows continued. When I tried to check into my room, the young lady at the front desk asked, "Where is your wife?" My wife couldn't come. Sorry, sir. This is a couples-only resort. I cannot allow you to check in without your wife. I paid $5,000 for a week. I need a room. Can you make an exception? She couldn't. I asked to speak to the manager. The night manager came to the counter and explained the rules, reminding me that the reservation clearly stated that singles were not allowed under any circumstances. When I asked where I could stay that night, he was kind enough to call another resort down the beach that had a room available. He even instructed the doorman to take me to this resort. When I tried to check in at the second resort, my credit card was declined. I pulled out the second card I carried in case of an emergency. Rejected. I tried calling Gwen to find out why our cards weren't working. No answer. I called the hotlines of both banks and was told that the cards had been canceled. I sent Gwen a message. Why did you cancel the cards? 10 minutes later, I received her answer. Brad suggested canceling the cards. He said you wouldn't need them because the resort was prepaid and all-inclusive. As I read her response, I think I surprised the hotel employee with the stream of profanity and other profanities that came out of my mouth. Luckily, my only luck that day, I had over $600 in cash. I paid for the night in cash, leaving me with just over half of my money. I walked into my room, probably the crappiest $300 a night room I've ever stayed in, and sat down for a moment to collect my thoughts. I couldn't access my bank accounts. I'll have to call the bank in the morning. Just in case, I called my brother in Denver. After explaining the situation, convincing him and his wife that I wasn't kidding, and then listening to them both say, "No, not Gwen," and "that bitch," I was finally able to get to the root of my immediate problem. My brother agreed to go to his bank first thing in the morning and transfer a few thousand to the nearest Western Union. Then I called the airline. My ticket was non-refundable, my mistake for choosing the cheapest option, which meant the tickets were not insured. I learned that if I pay for my return tickets in cash, I will have to purchase the tickets in person at the terminal. The first available flight from Punta Cana was a red-eye on Tuesday evening. I sat down to read Gwen's letter for the second and last time. Forrest, I'm sorry. I thought I could leave with you and we could start over. For the last 4 months, before you suggested we move away together, I had an affair with Brad. I didn't plan to cheat on you. As the project became more intense and I spent less time with you and more time with Brad, I began to lean on him for emotional support. No, this shouldn't have happened, but it did. I spent the weeks after his first kiss resisting moving on. But in the end, one long Saturday in the office, and after the rest of the team had left, I succumbed to his advances and became a cheater. I kept wondering why you couldn't see me moving away from you, and it pulled me closer to Brad. Only now, as I sit and write this letter, do I realize how many times you asked what was bothering me and what you could do to help me. But it's too late now, isn't it, to admit everything you tried to do for our marriage, including the week at the resort. When you told me about spending a week together to reconnect, it was like you opened my eyes. At that moment, I realized that I wanted to be your wife. The next day, I told Brad it was over. It was difficult for him to accept this. Almost every day, he tried to renew our romance, and in most cases, I resisted his advances. Yes, I'm weak. I was weak when I gave in to his temptation and started cheating. I was weak when I allowed him to convince me to say goodbye for the last time several times over those weeks. And I was weak when Brad showed up at the airport and convinced me to skip our flight and our week together. I hope you can spend this week at least enjoying the time to get through us. Brad told me that if it were him, spending a week at a resort in paradise with great food, lots of drinks, sun, and time away from work would be how he'd want it to end. I hope this is true for you too. I almost got on the plane, but Brad said that you should have found out about the affair after he showed up at the airport, and you probably wouldn't want to be around me after that. It made sense, and I couldn't imagine how difficult it would be to spend 5 hours sitting next to you and feeling your contempt. I also need this week to figure out what I've done. I'll try to answer your call when you return next Sunday. My clothes and everything else should be out of our house by then. Please don't hate me. I know I've done too much to be your loving wife again, but I couldn't bear your hatred. Regrettably, Gwen. I almost deleted this letter, but decided to save it better. At least it answered one question. The reason I never caught Gwen cheating was because she was probably doing it with that bastard in the office. The bar was open for another hour. Enough time to go downstairs and toast my cheating wife and the end of my marriage. Growing up, my father made sure that all 3 of his children heard his lesson about alcohol and drinking. I heard it before my senior year of school and again on the morning of my 21st birthday. Getting drunk never solved the problem. And to make matters worse, there are 3 types of bad drunks. There's the crying whiner, the aggressive asshole, and the laughing hyena. Don't be one of those guys. Drink slow and steady, enjoy the high, but know your limits, and if I ever find out that you drink and drive well, I don't care how old you are, I'll take your car and kick your ass. The fact is that my father was not a teetotaler. He could have a beer with the best of them. But I never saw my father drunk, act stupid, or drive after drinking more than 1 beer. He lived by his own rules. That's why I knew I would leave this bar after 2 beers, but I enjoyed both before returning to my room. As I drank my first, I looked around the bar. The bartender was looking at me, watching the dancers, and when our eyes met, we exchanged laughter. The guy on the dance floor was 60+ kilos heavier, and the lady looked like Olivia Oil. Young people can look who that is. I almost said out loud to the bartender, at least his wife didn't leave him at the airport. This got me thinking, how could I have screwed things up? Did I do something wrong? Were our entire 5 years together, including our 4 years of marriage, somehow an illusion? I didn't think so. It seemed to me that until a few months ago, Gwen and I were truly in love and happy. This got me thinking while I was drinking my second beer. We met 5 years ago at a Peoria minor league Chiefs baseball game. Gwen was with a group of girls and wore a Ryan Sandberg t-shirt. Although the Chiefs are affiliated with the St. Louis Cardinals, there are many Cubs fans in this part of Illinois. I sat down next to the group and immediately began trying to get to know a tall blonde with a beautiful face and long legs. I bought all four of them a beer to introduce myself. I then used her t-shirt to start a conversation. You seem too young to be wearing a Sandberg t-shirt. He was before your time, wasn't he? Ryan Sandberg was my dad's favorite player. He bought it for me. I introduced myself and extended my hand. I'm Thomas Lester. Everyone calls me Les. She shook my hand. Gwen Harper. Everyone calls me Gwen. She said that she is a senior at Bradley University, majoring in information technology. I told them that I had graduated from college 2 years ago and was working in the engineering department at Caterpillar. We're back to the Sandberg t-shirt theme somehow. Dad said the 5 best days of his life were the day he married my mom, the day I was born, the day my brother Pete was born, the day he was drafted by the Cubs, and the day Ryan Sandberg hit 2 home runs off Bruce Sutter. Did your father play for the Cubs? He never made it to the big leagues, but he spent 2 years in the Triple-A at Iowa. Still not bad. Gwen and I talked until the end of the game. While leaving with her friends, she gave me her number and told me to call. I did it the next day. That weekend we met, and that was the beginning of our romance. It took me a couple of months to finally get Gwen into my bed, and by that time I was already completely captivated by her. She was not only beautiful, but also loved sports and was an extremely bright person. Our first night together was a revelation. Gwen agreed to come back to my apartment after dinner and a movie. We were making out on my couch when Gwen asked me to take her to bed. Gwen had the body of a goddess, but she was the shyest sexual partner I had ever been with. She seemed pleased, but was too shy to look me straight in the eyes. Not a word came out of her mouth the entire time. This first night is a good example. After we made love, with her pressed against me, breathing peacefully, almost ready to fall asleep, she asked if she could borrow a shirt to sleep in. No, we sleep naked. I've never done that before. You'll like it. She fell asleep in my arms with her naked body next to me. The next morning, Gwen woke up and asked again, "Do you have anything I could wear?" "No, I want you to stay naked." She got out of bed, went to the bathroom, came out and joined me in the kitchen while I was making coffee. The whole time she didn't say a word or look directly at me, but I could watch a 5'6", 120-pound angelic work of divine art walk around my apartment. Outside the bedroom, we got along on many levels. We had one problem that could have been a deciding factor. Her friends, and especially her father, were very, and I emphasize very competitive, when it came to their sports teams. My alma mater, Purdue, played Bradley in men's basketball. We were in the pub watching the game. I enjoyed it when Purdue won, but that didn't mean I had control over whether they won or lost. But that night, every time Bradley scored, one of Gwen's guys would be in my face and then slap the palms of the other guys at the table. Luckily, Bradley won. I was told that I needed to buy the next circle. I gritted my teeth, didn't send them, but said winner pays and stuck to my words. Nothing happened, but I'm sure I didn't score any points that night among Gwen's friends. Gwen seemed pleased with all this and didn't say a word. Dodging that bullet didn't prepare me for meeting her father. It was Thanksgiving. Gwen and I had been dating seriously for 4 months, and it was time to meet the parents. I walked into their home in Arlington Heights and was immediately greeted by my mom and dad. As intelligent as Gwen was, she could sometimes make mistakes, and this was one of those times. Right after they met, Gwen jokes, "Watch out, Dad, he's a Cardinals fan." Was it just a grimace on the old man's face? It was 2011, 5 years before the Cubs finally went to the World Series and won it all, and in the previous 10 years, the Cards had been there 3 times and won twice. So, I fully understand how this can be a sore subject for a Cubs fan, especially a guy who played in their farm system. I needed to score points among my friends' friends, and I downplayed my bigotry. Gwen and I returned to Peoria after Thanksgiving and everything was back to normal. She already had a job at State Farm in Bloomington. I called Mr. Harper, asked for his daughter's hand in marriage, and bought a ring. I introduced Gwen to my parents 2 days before Christmas. They loved her and proposed to her late on Christmas Eve. Gwen cried, said yes, and we started making plans for a wedding at the end of July, exactly 1 year after that day in Dozer Park. We didn't move in together. Gwen kept her apartment with the two girls she shared it with, but Gwen stayed with me 4 or 5 nights a week. It was a little stupid, but her parents didn't believe in premarital cohabitation. We rented a small farmhouse between Peoria, where I worked, and Bloomington, where Gwen worked, and moved here after our honeymoon. We got married on July 30th and honeymooned in Miami Beach. Gwen wore a tiny bikini, but not a thong, and never went topless, thank God, but she was still one of the hottest beauties in South Beach. We made love every day that first year, and for the next 3.5 years we planned a house and children until her 30th birthday. That is, until 4 months ago, when everything went wrong and I found myself several thousand miles from home, drinking Dominican beer alone. The bartender rang last call. I finished my second beer, thanked the man for the space to think, tipped him well, and returned to my room. Late Monday morning, after calling our bank and finding out that all 3 of our accounts were closed, I was at the Western Union office receiving the money my brother had sent. Took a taxi to the airport and bought a ticket for a Tuesday evening flight after confirming that nothing would open before then. It was midday when I returned to the resort, having extended my room until the next day. Now what? I didn't want to start drinking, so I put on my swimming trunks and went for a run on the beach, ending with a swim in the warm sea. Returned to the room immediately after this. Nothing ruins the mood for a guy who was dumped less than 30 hours ago than seeing a bunch of couples embracing romantically. I ordered room service to avoid having to see the same thing while I ate. I spent the next 5 hours reading and almost finishing the Vince Flynn book I bought at the hotel boutique. Tuesday, another long run, swim, check out, lunch in town, head to the airport, 7 hours of reading another spy novel, boarding a plane, trying and failing to sleep on the plane, 2.5 hour drive to our house, and now I'm home standing in front of an empty bed. Most of Gwen's belongings and personal belongings have already been taken. It was Wednesday afternoon when I woke up after falling on my bed. I called a friend at his office and got the lawyer's name. A call to Henry Abbott's office secured a meeting for Thursday afternoon. Mr. Abbott, call me Henry, was completely focused on business. He had no intention of becoming my best friend, but he convinced me that he would do a great job representing me. He listened to my story and said that he would have the documents for my review on Monday if I could provide all the necessary information by Friday at noon. I left with a list of information needed and tasks that needed to be completed by Friday at noon. Henry was very methodical. He made me write down all the events from the moment Brad approached us at the airport to the moment I was handed the papers, highlighting how I was stranded without funds in a foreign country. In addition, I made a detailed list of our assets, all the money I spent in the Dominican Republic and the costs of returning from the island, as well as any common possessions that were not at home when I returned. It turned out that my rush to do these things didn't matter. On Monday morning, while I was waiting in the office for a call from Abbott's office saying that the documents were ready to be signed, our administrator walked into my office. "Les, there's a man here who wants to see you. He doesn't say what he wants." "Okay, Sarah, I'll go out there." Henry warned me that Gwen might file for divorce first. He convinced me that it would be better this way. This way we know their intentions. It also puts you in the role of the injured party. She ends the marriage, not you. Well, it sounds legal from a legal standpoint, but it's still annoying to receive the paperwork. When I read the documents, I got angry and almost made the mistake of calling Gwen to cuss me out. Luckily, my brain kicked in and I avoided this trap. One of my friends told me that his wife's lawyer provoked him in the same way. My friend called his estranged wife and started yelling at her. The next morning, he was served with a no-contact order, which was cited during the trial as evidence of his aggressive behavior. I brought the documents to my lawyer, and, as they say, The games began. 2 months after I was officially notified, my lawyer and I were sitting in court waiting for the judge. When the judge came in, I was almost speechless. Of course, it had to be a female judge. I've heard horror stories of guys being swindled in divorce court. I was preparing for the worst. Gwen's lawyer presented their list of demands. Gwen couldn't even look at me while her lawyer spoke for her. I noticed that bastard Brad wasn't in the courtroom. Smart move on their part. My lawyer told our side of the story. None of this was news to the judge, since all the details had already been presented and considered in advance. There was an opportunity for objections from their lawyer, then the last word from our side. The judge asked Gwen a question, addressing her by her maiden name, the same way Gwen's lawyer called her. Miss Harper, you are not making any allegations of abuse by Mr. Lester. Did you just fall in love with this Mr. Bradley Parker and decide to leave your husband because you fell in love with another man? Gwen and her lawyer looked at each other for a second. Then she replied, "Yes, Your Honor, there was no violence." Thank you for your honest response. If there's one thing I don't tolerate in my gym, it's people using false accusations of violence to gain an advantage. The judge paused for a moment, reviewing her notes. This court grants a divorce, effective immediately. No alimony will be ordered. Each party will retain their retirement funds and personal belongings. Assets held jointly will be divided in half. From Miss Harper's share, she will reimburse Mr. Lester for the $9,000 he spent on the ruined vacation, all expenses during his stay and the cost of return. Miss Harper will also pay the legal costs of both parties and threatening $200 toward rent for 7 months, the time from the time she left the house until the end of the current lease of their rental home. The judge looked straight at Gwen. Young lady, you say here that you loved your husband. If this is how you treat the man you love, God help the one you don't love. I could have been knocked down with just one feather. Out of 20,000, half of our let's buy a house savings, she had to give me almost 16,000. As the lawyer and I walked out, Gwen could be heard calling after me, "Forrest." As I left the courtroom, I saw Brad sitting on the bench. He started to get up, but I was already in his way. You know, she'll cheat on you too. I left. On the street, I asked Henry if I could buy him lunch. We crossed to the other side of the street to a diner. I almost shit myself when I saw that the judge was a woman. I thought that I would definitely be undressed. That's where you're wrong, for 2 reasons. It's always some old judge who looks at his sweet wife and gives her everything clean. And we couldn't have a better judge than Judy Carter. You knew we would end up in her hall. Why didn't you tell me? Didn't want to create expectations or let you relax, just in case she decided to question you. Henry continued, Judge Carter has been married to the same man for 40 years and adores him. She's a respected judge, and he's a mechanic at a local shop that supplies parts for Caterpillar. But it's a marriage of equals. Barry Carter is a great guy, humble even in the club, despite his 5 handicaps and winning every damn tournament. Henry paused to take a sip of his coffee. Let me tell you one last story, just because you got burned your first time on the wedding aisle. But you need to know that there are wonderful girls out there. The judge and Barry are at a dance party at the country club, sharing a table with me and my wife and another couple. One of the local rich people, the owner of one of the car dealerships in the city, approaches, ignores Barry, and invites the judge to dance. Barry is not the kind of person who will allow himself to be passed over, but he is courageous enough to let his wife Judy break up the situation. Has anyone ever taught you manners? She asked. No gentleman would ever ask a lady to dance without asking her date. Go away and pray you never end up in my court. If that happens, tell your lawyer you need another judge, because I can't promise you a fair hearing. The judge leaned over and kissed her husband. She knows that some people underestimate her husband just because he works with his hands. I laughed as I imagined it, just half an hour in Carter's courtroom, and I could imagine how it happened. You're different from most lawyers. I'm sorry if it sounds like I'm disparaging your profession, but now it was Henry's turn to laugh. My dad worked on the assembly line at CAT for over 30 years. My mom stayed home and raised 5 kids. The day I went to law school, my dad hugged me and congratulated me and said, "Don't be an asshole. He's 90, but I know he'll still kick my ass if he has to. That keeps me in line." We finished lunch, I thanked him again, and we went our separate ways. It's time to start a new life. Colleagues and other well-meaning acquaintances tried to connect me with the women they thought I needed to meet to get through my grief. The problem with all these acquaintances was that I didn't need a new relationship yet. Everything was still too fresh, I just needed sex. And I couldn't imagine going out with my sister, cousin, or any other colleague if I was only interested in quick sex that didn't develop into something more. Call me sensitive, Mr. Sometimes I did have sex, most often by hanging out at local bars with a reputation for hooking up. I had enough free time to start taking dance lessons. But there are always risks when it comes to being a ladies' man. One evening, I spent an hour having a great time with a particularly well-built lady. We were already heading out when her left hand caught the light, and I saw a characteristic lightening around the fourth finger, a clear sign of a recently removed ring. "Are you married?" She gave me a deer-in-the-headlights look and stuttered her answer. "Yes, but my husband is on a business trip." "Where is he?" "In Afghanistan. He's in the army." I swear I've never been so close to hitting a woman, not even Gwen and all her antics. "You should be ashamed. Your husband is risking his life and you're looking for someone to sleep with." She began to cry before collapsing onto the sidewalk. "I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I'm such a terrible wife." I picked her up from the sidewalk. She looked into my eyes and started mumbling. "He left 5 months ago, and I worry every day. I was lonely, and a couple of guys at work started hitting on me. I didn't want to cheat with someone I'd have to see again, so I went out tonight. It was the first time, I swear. I needed to feel like a woman. I didn't even know if I could have sex, but I wanted to feel a man's hug and at least a kiss. God, what a shame." I looked across the street at the late dinner. "Let's go get a cup of coffee. Put on your ring, and let's go." I gave her a clean handkerchief that I always carried with me. "Here, dry your tears before we go in." Kelly and I sat in the cafe for the next hour, and she told me all about Sergeant John Tyler. She told me about 2 assholes in her office, including her boss, who tried to force her to go out with them. I convinced Kelly to talk to HR. I took Kelly home. We agreed to meet for lunch next Saturday. I wanted to keep an eye on how she dealt with these 2 bloodsuckers, and I was going to make sure she did. About every 3 weeks, we met for coffee and a sandwich. We were just talking. Kelly said the company transferred her to another department and reprimanded the 2 men. One day, she entered a cafe, and everyone could see the joy on her face. "John will be home in 2 weeks." I congratulated her. He said that he was happy for her and that I thought this would be our last dinner. She seemed saddened by this, but understood. "Thank you for being my friend, Les. You helped me with those 2 at work and helped me understand how I could have lost the best thing I had, John's love. You were there when I needed a true friend. I won't forget about this." I will miss her, but I left the restaurant with good feelings. I walked out of my office building and was greeted by a 6'3" Highlander in a desert uniform. I recognized him from photographs that Kelly had once shown me. "Are you Thomas Lester?" I didn't reach out, deciding to let him set the pace of the conversation. "Can we talk somewhere?" "There's a bar 4 blocks south. I can meet you there." Cold. We walked to our cars, and he followed me. Inside, I treated myself to the first round. Kelly told me what happened. I wanted to look you in the eyes and hear it from you. I have to admit, it's crazy to come home and hear from your wife that she went on dates to sleep with someone. Well, it didn't happen, at least not with me, and I doubt it would with anyone else. She had a moment of weakness. She loves you. So why didn't you take advantage of the situation? My ex-wife cheated on me. It was like hell. I can't do that to another guy, especially someone in uniform. Have you ever served? No, I didn't have what it took to take the risks you did. I'm just glad there are guys willing to do it. I'm starting to think I'm crazy for continuing this. Risking my life and my marriage there. It would be different if someone really cared about the war. I'm thinking about going back to university. I was studying to be an electrical engineer when I joined the Army. If you decide to go to Purdue, let me know. I have contacts there that might help if you decide to apply. It can't hurt. I gave him one of my business cards. I don't think we can be friends, Lester. I can't look at you without thinking about Kelly almost cheating on me with you. I appreciate what you did, but I just can't. After a short pause as we drank our beers, John broke the silence. You're an unusual guy, Lester. You're missing out on the chance to sleep with a woman like Kelly. You're sitting here not asking me about my time there. You can't imagine how many guys ask, as if that's what we want to talk about. I think it's your right to talk about it or not. I'm not going to take the dubious pleasure of listening to your war stories. He finished his beer, shook my hand, thanked me for the beer and for everything, then left. I received one letter from Kelly. John Tyler was retiring from the Army. They were moving to Texas, where he planned to finish his studies at Texas A&M. They also planned to have a child as soon as he graduated. The letter contained another thank you from her. I wish them all the best. Hopefully, they can be an example of how a person can be tempted and almost fall, but learn from the experience and end up with a strong marriage. Despite my own history, I still hope for romance. A month later, someone knocked on my door early on a Sunday morning. I opened the door, surprised to find Gwen's little brother standing in front of me. Looking over his shoulder, I saw her father sitting in the car in my driveway. Les, Dad and I would like to talk. Well, Pete, you can come in, and your father is just as welcome in my house as I was in his. Tell him to stay in the car while you come in. Pete went back to the car and talked to his dad, and I didn't hear what was said, but the body language said it all. I resisted the urge to give the old man the middle finger. Pete returned alone. I let him in and poured him a cup of coffee. I always liked him and got along with Pete. You angered your father so much there on the street. It won't be a joy to go home. Sorry about that, but if he had just let me go a little, I would have done the same. Now that I'm no longer dating your sister, I don't have to pretend. Why don't you tell me why you're here? It's about Gwen. Yesterday my dad and I came here to pick her up from that idiot Brad's apartment. He hit her. I'm sorry to hear this, but what does this have to do with me? We separated a year ago and divorced over 6 months ago. Father and I were wondering if you would consider bringing her back. She cried all last night, saying that she wants to be your wife and that she made the biggest mistake in her life when she left you. I'm sorry that she got hurt. I sincerely don't wish harm on anyone, especially on someone I once loved. But I can never go back to Gwen. I can never trust her. She broke my heart in half. Where is she now? At the Holiday Inn. She couldn't run into you, but she didn't mind when we said we'd go to your place. Again, I'm sorry. Good luck finding a safe place for her, but it won't be here with me. I stood up from the table and extended my hand, signaling that the conversation was over. Pete stood up and shook my hand. There was sadness in his eyes. For what it's worth, I can't blame you, but I had to try. My sister ruined everything. You are a good guy and always treated her well. I don't know what's on her mind to ruin all this. Bye, Les. I didn't walk Pete to the door. I didn't want to see their father again. I heard a car start and drive out of the driveway. That was the last time I heard from this family. Mutual friends told me that Gwen had moved back north and taken a job at Northbrook in Allstate. I met Grace at a concert on the campus of the University of Illinois. No, it wasn't a rock concert. It was a chamber orchestra from Chicago, and the evening events were devoted to variations on La Folia by Salieri, Gemini, and other Italian composers. Sitting next to me in the auditorium was a small, pixie-like woman who reminded me of photographs I had seen of Twiggy, Patty Boyd, and other fashion British models. Grace started the conversation during the break by asking if I was enjoying the concert. I learned that she was a graduate student studying graphic arts and played the cello and agreed to have me buy her a drink after the concert. We had a drink at a nearby pub, swapping stories. You would think that with the name Grace, she was born into a religious family, but that was not the case at all. Her parents named her after Grace Slick, lead singer of Jefferson Airplane. She grew up in what might be called a commune outside of Carbondale. She was extremely interested when I told her that I lived in a farmhouse. "Do you have a garden?" "I'm surrounded by my landlord's cornfields. There is a piece of land, probably 40 by 40 feet, that the previous tenant used to grow vegetables, but I have never planted in the 5 years I have lived there. There are only weeds there now. It's a shame. Gardening can be very relaxing, almost spiritual. Not to mention how delicious the fresh food is." We moved on to other topics until it was time to leave. I walked her home and received a sweet kiss on the cheek at her door and her phone number. She was unlike any girl I had ever known. The next day I called, and we agreed to attend the opening of a student art exhibit on campus the following weekend. It's been a great week at work. I received a promotion and a decent increase in salary. All the extra time I've put in since my divorce has been paying off. On Saturday afternoon, I picked Grace up from her apartment. It was a beautiful April day, and I was tempted to suggest spending it on the outdoor patio with a beer instead of being indoors watching student work. 30 minutes later, after passing the first gallery, I wished I had suggested going to the pub. Almost every work, whether paintings or sculptures, seemed created only to shock. If this is considered art and something that Grace associates with, then our date will soon be over with no chance of future meetings. I think I want to leave now. Grace squeezed my hand. "Can we decide after the next gallery? If you still feel the same way after this, we can leave." Our hands were still together. Grace pulled me into the next room. I looked around, almost reluctantly, but was pleasantly surprised by what I saw. It was art, at least from my point of view. Instead of art intended to shock and offend, it was art that was inspiring or thought-provoking, rather than simply scandalous. We walked through the room, stopping at each work, comparing thoughts, until we came to a painting of two nude figures, a woman behind a man, descending an open staircase. Although they were naked, it was their faces that caught my attention. What were they thinking? Then I noticed a ring on the woman's left hand as she was holding onto the railing. The man's finger was missing a ring. I stayed looking at this painting until I looked at the card to read the title of the piece and the name of the artist. Oil on Canvas, Le Dernier Après Midi des Amoureux, by Grace Powell Adams. I looked at Grace. "You drew this." Grace gave me an expressive look with her smile. "Yes, I know. Do you like it?" "That's fantastic. Is the title in French? What does it mean?" "Last Day of Lovers." "Ah, now their facial expressions make sense. It's all over for them. Why?" "I can't decide. What do you think?" I knew what I was thinking, but I wasn't ready to share. "I'll tell you later. Did you use live models?" "Two other students. They spent hours on the stairs posing. Let's go to the last gallery. I want to show you something else." On the wall of the last gallery was Grace's second work. It was radically different from the first one. It was an animation drawing of a giant aquarium filled with hundreds of different fish and sea creatures. "Oh my God, this is fantastic. This is something my niece would absolutely adore. You are so talented. Why is all this great work here and all that crap in the first gallery?" Grace laughed before answering. "Most of us think that the professor who is curating the exhibition is using the shock value of the show to make a name for himself among the avant-garde artists in Chicago. I hope this doesn't sound mean. On the contrary, it only confirms your good taste. I hope you don't mind that I can send a letter to the university with a proposal to at least change the places of the galleries. We finally made it to the pub and spent a few hours drinking, eating, and getting to know each other better. The more Grace opened up, the more I was amazed at how down-to-earth this young woman was, especially considering where she grew up. Grace put things back in their place. A commune is not a place for pleasure. My parents were devoted and monogamous. You could count my partners on one hand. Still, your picture of the two lovers was so erotic. Well, don't confuse quantity with quality. My two past long-term lovers deserve to be in the Sex Hall of Fame. Not what the guy wants to hear. Grace saw the expression on my face. Sorry, Les, it didn't come out that way. Sex shouldn't be a competition, you know? It's about two people sharing. That's what I meant when I said these two should be in the Hall of Fame. They understood that it was not about their pleasure or my pleasure, but about our common one. The evening was getting cooler. It was time to go indoors. Les, do you mind if we finish early tonight? I have a project to finish by Monday. I shouldn't have spent this whole day joking around in the first place, but I really wanted to spend time with you. I agreed. What could I say? It was a fantastic first date, and I didn't want to ruin it. Grace asked if we could have dinner together next Wednesday. We agreed that she would come to my house, and I would cook dinner. On Wednesday, Grace arrived at 5:30 as if she were recruiting. She was most interested in the weed-filled area that had once been a garden. It was surrounded by a 7-foot perimeter fence to keep deer out. Grace took a shovel from the garage and started digging along the fence. That's great. They buried the fence to keep the rabbits out. Grace washed up. We ate stew and drank beer, and I learned more about her. By the time we finished dinner, we had discussed my reaction to her painting of two lovers, given how my marriage had ended, and Grace had apologized if the painting had upset me. She told more about herself. She speaks Italian and French, plays the cello, and is an accomplished artist. What can't you do? I'm no good at sports. I'm completely clumsy. I've tried tennis, softball, horse riding, you name it. If it takes skill, I'm bad at it. I can run and swim, but I'm that person in the back row at yoga class who is falling. I tried not to laugh at this image. Grace laughed for both of us. It's hard to believe. I mean, you have to have eye-hand coordination to play the cello and draw. I'm nervous. Don't even think about taking me on the dance floor. I'm a complete clown. My legs and arms are flailing. I can't draw if anyone is watching. The only reason I can play the cello is because I learned how to play cello in my room when no one was looking. Didn't you have a music teacher? My mom. Grace looked at the clock on the wall. I need to get back to town, but before I go, I want to ask you a huge favor. I'd like to plant a garden in your backyard. I'll do all the work, buy the seeds, pull the weeds, everything. I'll share the harvest with you. You can eat fresh food. We discussed logistics, parameters regarding my privacy, and when she agreed to my demands, I agreed to her request. Of course, the prospect of fresh food was appealing, but the thought of Grace being around for the next 6 months was what convinced me. For the next 2 weeks, Grace would call me at work, get my consent to come over, and I would come home to find her working in our garden. She rented a cultivator one day. She was halfway across the lot when I arrived. I asked if I could try it. She showed me how it worked, and I finished the job. On Friday, organic cow manure was piled in front of the house. We spent the whole weekend taking turns wheelbarrowing it around and mixing it into the soil, even though it was drizzling both days. When we finished, Grace surprised me by hugging me and kissing me. I've missed this so much since I left home. It makes me so happy, digging in the ground, smelling the soil. It's even better when the sun is shining, feeling its warmth on your body. It was my first time gardening, but I knew what she meant. Over the years, I watched my landlord plow and harvest the corn, but I was detached from it. Working on this small piece of land was direct contact with nature. We went into the house and made sandwiches for dinner. I sensed that Grace had something on her mind and waited for her to speak. Les, my lease is up in 3 weeks, right after the session. My roommates are graduating. Would you consider renting me a second bedroom here? I'll pay rent and share the cost of food and utilities. Grace's question upset me. I hope to be more than just a friend to Grace. We met periodically. Between Grace's studies, gardening, and my recent promotion, free time was scarce. Apparently, Grace saw me as a roommate friend and not in a romantic sense. But I liked her, and if this is a way to spend time together, then I will accept it. Yes. We sat down and discussed the details, division of responsibilities, how much she will contribute to rent and groceries. I had to ask, what about guests? She looked at me in surprise. What do you mean guests? Well, if one of us brings an overnight guest, how does that work? I've never had roommates other than my ex-wife, so the topic never came up. How do you and your roommates handle it now? Grace looked like she was about to cry. We ask all guests to respect other neighbors. This has never been a problem. I decided to drop the topic. I guess you and I can sort it out if this ever comes up. Grace left soon after. She said she would be back next weekend to start planting. Saturday morning was warm and sunny, a perfect spring day. I had to work at the office and decided to bike 10 miles into town. I left a note on the kitchen table for Grace before I left, saying I'd be home by 4 and asking if we could have dinner together. I turned on the computer, nothing. Then it dawned on me. The guys did an update this weekend, and I completely forgot. This event made me happy. Not everything was lost. I had a pleasant morning ride, and will have a second one on the way home. And most importantly, I could spend a sunny day in the garden with Grace. I turned off the terminal and went out, whistling, joyful, and went home. Strangely, the driveway gate was closed and Grace's car was parked inside the gate. The garden was located behind the house and was not visible from the road. I shouldered the bike and walked through the gap between the gates. I walked past the house and looked into the garden. There she was, working with a hoe, completely naked except for her gardening boots. Her back was to me as she worked along the row with a hoe. I watched as she bent down to place the seeds in the ground and then covered them with her hands. Grace had her summer dress hanging on a shovel stuck in the ground nearby. It was probably there so she could get dressed if she heard someone opening the driveway gate. There was time to step back and pretend I didn't see anything, because she was my friend, not my lover. I took one last look at her ass, then turned to slowly walk back and noisily walk up the driveway. But I didn't take into account the big barn cat behind me. I tripped over the cat, dropped my bike, and fell face first into the ground. Grace screamed, "Who's there?" I turned around just in time to see her grab the dress. Now I could see her completely from the front. She had perfect breasts and a flat stomach. She froze, realizing it was me. I stopped looking at her body and looked up to her eyes. Those beautiful forest eyes with a golden tint held my gaze. She began to pull on her dress. "Stop." I jumped up and rushed into the garden. My arms wrapped around her body and I kissed her. Grace kissed back. "I love you." Grace seemed surprised. "Is it true?" "Yes, it's true. I want to be your friend, but most of all, I want to be your lover." "Then why didn't you kiss me earlier?" "Because I'm stupid. I didn't know how to tell my friend Grace that I wanted to be more than a friend. I didn't want to lose your friendship if that's all I could have. And I thought the same about you. I thought maybe I wasn't sexy enough for you to see me as a lover." "Why did you think that? You are beautiful." "Yes, sure. I saw the way you looked at Janice." "Who is Janice?" "Nude on the stairs, my painting. And one night I was looking at your photo album in the living room. There were several pictures of Gwen, including one of her in a bikini. Hell, she could be a Victoria's Secret model. And I don't have boobs, I don't have hips or a plump ass, and my legs don't go up like you guys like to say. I squeezed Grace's buttocks with both hands. Listen, I won't lie to you. Gwen had a great body, but yours is also beautiful, just in a different way. Okay, I believe you. What now? Maybe the landing will wait a little. I have something I want to show you. I didn't wait for an answer. I picked her up and carried her into the house, straight into the bedroom, onto my unmade bed. Grace was dirty from gardening, and I was sweaty from cycling. I hope everything that happens means you'll keep your office instead of turning it into your roommate's bedroom. You are reading my mind. Will you move here with me? Yeah, I still have some stuff to finish, so it won't be for another week and a half. I'll wait. I had to ask. It was killing me. What about naked gardening? There are a few things I grew up doing naked. Gardening makes me feel closer to the earth. Also swimming. I grew up swimming naked in a man-made lake on the commune. I couldn't believe it the first time I had to put on a swimsuit to swim, yikes. An hour later, I was experiencing a completely new hobby, naked gardening. I couldn't wait to try naked swimming. It never occurred to me to let Brad get away with seducing my wife, even though Gwen was also responsible for the destruction of our marriage. But he deserved payback for his clear disrespect for our vows and the subsequent pressure he put on my naive wife to ruin me financially during the divorce. I've never been in a hurry for revenge, though, and now, as my relationship with Grace progressed, was it still important? Of course it was. I could easily have ambushed him with a baseball bat and beaten him severely, but I didn't want to end up in jail. Guys like me don't last long in that environment. But in today's online world, people are so easy to spy on. Since my divorce from Gwen, I have spent an hour every week using search engines, LinkedIn, Facebook, and other portals that allowed me to safely exist in Brad's world under an assumed name. I kept a low profile, never doing anything malicious, waiting for the right moment to act. I've heard the phrase, "Revenge is a dish best served cold." Is this true? In my case, this was definitely the case. 2 years after my divorce, a great opportunity presented itself. By then, Brad was working in the IT department of a respected conservative brokerage firm and was engaged to another woman. I decided to spare his innocent bride the trouble of divorcing him. It would be better to arrange this before the wedding. A few weeks before Brad's wedding to this beautiful young woman, it was time to take action. It cost me $4,000, but it was worth it. Not many secrets were known about Brad's life, and Brad, with his ego and sexual predilections, was almost too easily swayed by what I had planned. Every Wednesday, several guys from Brad's office spent the evening drinking at a local hotel. It was a typical men's evening. Most of the guys left after an hour or two, but usually one or two single guys, including Brad, stayed until 8 or 9. The Chicago girl hired to seduce Brad didn't have to work hard to lure him into her hotel room. She caught Brad's attention while sitting at the bar, and he said goodbye to his last colleague and asked Lacey if he could buy her a drink. She said yes, and for the next 15 minutes she allowed herself to be seduced by his smooth chatter. At her suggestion, they bought more rounds, and Brad agreed when Lacey offered to finish them in her room. 2 small hidden cameras were installed in the room, ready to capture the action on the bed from different angles. The next day, Lacey and I watched 2 videos. Our agreement was that I could only use screenshots and her face would not appear in them. It wasn't hard to collect over 20 great photos of Brad, in all his glory, having sex with Lacey. The best screenshots were sent to Brad's boss, his fiancée, her father, a few special friends Brad. I debated whether to tell Brad that it was me who set him up. In the end, I didn't. Call me a coward, but I didn't want to escalate the series of revenge. I had a lot more to lose now, given my relationship with Grace. Either way, my revenge was complete and Brad left town with his tail between his legs. For the next 15 months, we lived together and loved each other in that farmstead. It was the happiest time of my life up to that moment. Grace taught me a lot, made me read great books, and expanded my horizons. I met her parents at the commune on that first Independence Day. Again, I was not prepared for how they surprised me that weekend. Who would have thought that their community would give me the most wonderful Independence Day celebration I had experienced to that day? The first time I tried skinny dipping was late at night when everyone was asleep. It was just me and Grace in the lake. It was unusual, but really nice. A little over a year after she moved in with me, and we were still crazy about each other, we sat on the back porch drinking beer before dinner. Today I was offered a job. From the tone of your voice, I wouldn't like this, would I? I was offered the opportunity to work on an animated film. This is the company Enlightenment, based in France. They are creating a new animated film based on Dickens' A Christmas Carol. I'll have to move to Paris for almost a year during development. I knew Grace had few opportunities in central Illinois, but Paris, I needed to put on adult pants, but it would have been difficult. Wow, this sounds like an amazing opportunity. I guess I'm surprised, though. I didn't know you were applying for positions outside of the States. I didn't apply. It came through a sort of friend of a friend who was already there. One of my professors sent samples of my work to several people. It got into circulation, and they called me today. I thought you were talking about freelancing so you could stay here. Freelancing is difficult if you don't have a reputation. This will help me get that reputation when I come back. Or you may find that Paris is more exciting than Peoria and Bloomington. How to keep them on the farm after they've seen Paris, you know. I thought about it, dear. You always said you thought I was pretty down to earth. You know how much I love the farm, and you should know how much I love you. When do you need to give them an answer? Until the end of the week. Well, you know me. I won't say no, and I will support you 100%. Give me 2 days to come to terms with this. Then I'll tell you it's normal, and you can give them your answer. Grace stood up from her lounge chair and sat on my lap. Her arms wrapped around my neck, and her lips touched mine. I will miss her. I hesitated whether to tell Grace about her gift. The diamond ring was in my gun safe. 2 days later, when I told Grace that she could confirm her participation in Illumination, I did not tell her about the ring. Grace left the day after her graduation. I did my best to hold back, but it wasn't easy. I don't think I fooled anyone, but I hope Grace appreciated that I didn't fall apart. Grace left her car and almost all of her personal belongings, including her art supplies, at my house. Mother Grace hugged me tightly and whispered in my ear, "She loves you, trust her." I drove her to O'Hare Airport and kissed her goodbye. Damn, how I hate this damn airport. Ever since Gwen left me there all those years ago, and here it is again. Only this time my love flies away, and I stay. We wrote letters, exchanged photos and emails, talked on Skype at least once a week, and made plans for me to take my next vacation to Paris. None of this helped when I became depressed. Much of the garden we planted together that year was rotting in the fields. One of my work colleagues came to my house one afternoon and, seeing the state of the garden, offered to pick up the harvest. I was indifferent and said it was okay. Debbie King, one of the administrative assistants in our department, was a widow with 2 boys who had lost her husband to severe hepatitis. She and her sons came to my house on Saturday, and 3 of them spent several hours harvesting. "What are you going to do with all these vegetables?" I asked. "My neighbor will teach me canning. I need to buy a few cans for canning and stockpile food for the winter. You know what? I have at least 3 dozen cans that you can rent. Just promise that if we need them next year, you will return them." "Why don't you need them next year?" "You never know." Grace was a conservative. I just poured beer while she worked. Debbie looked at me. "She loves you, Les. She will be back." I turned and walked back into the house, talking to myself. Hope so. Debbie left soon after with her boys, a few boxes of harvest, and 40 canning jars. Grace had planned to take 10 days off between Christmas and New Year's weekend and was planning to fly home during that time. so we decided early November would be a good time for me to fly to Paris. Grace will have to work during the week, but we will have evenings and 2 weekends to spend together. I boarded a direct flight to Paris, crossing my fingers that my O'Hare airport wouldn't be jinxed. Grace was standing at the customs exit at Charles de Gaulle Airport, waiting for me. She was so beautiful. We hugged and kissed, to which several people applauded. I took my luggage, and we took a taxi to her apartment. Not even 2 minutes after we closed the door behind us, we were both naked and exploring each other's bodies with our eyes, mouths, and hands. I picked her up, holding her tightly to me. "Where is the bedroom?" Grace laughed. "Here she is. Pull the mattress out of the sofa." Only then did I look around. Grace was living in a sort of mini-efficiency. I pulled the mattress out of the couch and fell onto the most uncomfortable bed I've ever had to lie on. Grace continued to laugh. "You should have told me. I would book a hotel room." "Oh no, I want you to have the full experience. You must know how I live in the bosom of French luxury. Plus, it's better than some of my colleagues. I have a bathroom with a bath. The two girls don't even have a bathroom. They have to go to a common corridor." "That'll do." I hugged Grace and pulled her onto my lap. I woke up and took a minute to get my bearings. After using the restroom, I found the kitchen, which was just a counter with a small refrigerator on the bottom and a hot stove on top. Grace left instructions on how to use the coffee maker. There was half a baguette on the cutting board, and there was jam in the refrigerator. I took a bath, shaved, and got dressed. The key hung by the door. I decided to spend some time walking around the area. At 4 o'clock, I was back in the apartment, reading the book I had brought, when Grace burst through the door. "That's all. You will not be out of my sight for the next 64 hours. It suits me. We don't even have to leave this room." "Ha! Have you seen the inside of my doll refrigerator? We will die of hunger." "Isn't there delivery in Paris? Is there a Domino's here?" I was joking. Of course, it was Paris. "Don't know, but no one eats here until 7 in the evening. Love me, and then let's go to dinner." Grace was already undressing when she said this. I couldn't argue with her logic. We spent Saturday at the Orsay Museum and had a nice lunch near Notre Dame. Several of Grace's colleagues wanted to meet me. Grace declined the Friday meeting because she wanted us to have a quiet evening together, but agreed to meet them on Saturday evening. When we entered the restaurant that evening, about a dozen people were already sitting at a long table at the end of the room. It seemed that Grace was popular among her colleagues, and many of them wanted to meet the man who had won her heart. After introductions, handshakes with the men, and blowing kisses with the women, we sat in small groups. I'm with an Englishwoman, Holly, a Japanese girl, Megumi, and a Frenchman, Claude. Both Megumi and Claude spoke excellent English. I had a harder time understanding Holly than any of them. Periodically, Grace moved between the other two groups, both of which spoke French. The waiter took our drink orders. Various plates of appetizers appeared and disappeared. Holly and I had a fun debate about who was more responsible for the best rock and roll, the Americans or the British. Claude sided with Holly, arguing that the Rolling Stones' Exile on Main Street, recorded in France, was the best rock album of all time. Megumi took my side, saying that she grew up listening to her mother's vinyl recording of Cheap Trick's live at Budokan, and opined that Elvis and Chuck Berry started it all. It was all great fun. No one took it seriously. At one point, as a joke, I asked Grace, "Baby, who is the best rock singer of all time?" Grace did not hesitate to answer, "Not just the best woman, but also the best singer, regardless of gender, Mrs. Slick." The topic turned from music to sports soccer via soccer, when suddenly Grace spoke loudly in French and started scolding one of the French guys. I've never seen Grace so angry. I didn't understand a word. Everyone else spoke French and looked in surprise. Even the neighboring tables stopped to listen. After a full minute, Grace apologized to her colleagues, even though I understood the word sorry, and told me we were leaving. Outside the restaurant, I asked, What was that? Jean Paul is one of those French idiots who can't help but humiliate Americans. People like him are in the minority, as far as I know. He knew you didn't speak French, and he took the opportunity to say a few nasty things about American men, and you in particular, Renee. I heard it, and I couldn't just leave it like that. I hope you don't mind that I defended your honor. No, of course not. But why did we have to leave? Renee is such a bitch. She knows I can't stand Jean Paul, and she invited him anyway. I don't want to lie to you. Jean Paul is a scoundrel. He tried to persuade me to go out with him. I told him no, that we are in a relationship, and I will not break my word to you. We're still in a relationship, aren't we? Yes. This is good. I was afraid to bring up the topic while we were apart. I wouldn't be able to handle it, hearing it from afar, if you started dating. I haven't changed my mind. I'll still be here when you get back. I love you so much, Les. Please don't ever break my heart. We met with her colleagues again before I left, this time without Jean Paul and Renee. Claude made sure I understood that not all French people shared Jean Paul's anti-American sentiments. It turned out to be a fun, drama-free evening. Paris renewed my faith that Grace and I had a future. The next 5 months were very long, given the cold, long winter on the prairie. Grace's visit over the holidays helped. The promise of spring brought warmer weather, more hours of daylight, and then it was only a few months before its return. I had originally planned to spend a week in March in Paris, but Grace said her schedule was crazy right now since they were in the midst of preparations. To ensure the film is ready for the holiday release, the first cut of the graphics should be ready by mid-May. I canceled my travel plans. With luck, Grace will be home by mid-June. It was May 10th, a beautiful day. The temperature had reached 77 degrees, and the sun was shining after 3 days of rain. I was driving home from work, looking forward to sitting on the back porch with a glass of beer. I don't know why, but it made me feel closer to Grace. So I spent the previous Saturday renting a cultivator and tilling the soil in the garden. Maybe I'll plant some tomatoes and green beans, simple things. In the meantime, I would have a beer and look at what I now considered Grace's place. I stopped the car, surprised that the gate was closed. Instead of opening the gate and driving through, I just walked to the back of the house. There, in the garden, leaning on a hoe, stood the most beautiful, absolutely naked garden nymph, looking straight at me. We stood there for half a minute, just looking at each other, before she dropped the hoe and ran into my arms. "Why are you here?" I asked. "We finished early, 3 days ago. They only need half the team for revisions, corrections, and post-production. They asked for volunteers for someone to leave, so I volunteered. I packed my bags, boarded the first available flight to O'Hare, took the shuttle, and arrived home 2 hours ago. Hope it's okay. I wanted to surprise you. I hope you don't have any plans." Damn, this woman could be so naive sometimes. It was time to clarify the situation. "Yes, I have plans. Wait a minute." Grace was still holding me tightly. I freed myself from her embrace, ran into the house, and opened the safe. He came back, and the naked nymph was still standing there. I opened the box and got down on one knee. "Will you marry me, Grace?" Like I said, she can be naive. I completely surprised her with my proposal. It took her too long to find her voice, but when she did, she said the right words. "Yes, I love you so much, Thomas Lester. Maybe Sunday is too soon. This will give us time to get a license and for our parents to come here." We actually got married on Sunday. In the garden, the place of all places. It was a little messy, but the 20 or so guests, including both sets of parents, some siblings and a few others, didn't seem to mind. And Grace put on a dress, even though it was a garden wedding. I'm sure my parents appreciated it. Grace and I stayed at the farmhouse until the harvest. We spent the summer looking for our own place. We found the perfect spot a few miles north of town and about a quarter mile from the river, far enough away to not have to worry about flooding. It was 4 acres, two of which were wooded, and enough level land to build another garden for Grace. The lot had a double-wide trailer and a garage that was larger than the trailer. We'll turn the south side of the garage into a studio for Grace and still have room for both cars. We will sell the double-wide trailer as soon as the house is built. The builders dug the foundation and laid the basement walls, but the weather has changed, and we will have to wait until spring before they start work again. Grace freelancers, but mostly focuses on her painting. She's so good. For example, Le Dernier Après Midi des Amoureux was sold for $8,000. So between gardening, freelancing, and painting, Grace is busy but happy. It also gives her the opportunity to be a housewife. Grace is pregnant with our first child and is due in May. She wants 3 or 4 children, and we decided not to wait. Yes, I'm a happy guy. I have a wonderful, loving wife, a well-paying job that I enjoy, a baby on the way, and a beautiful piece of land to share with my pixie bride. I just have one problem: how do I convince Grace to keep her clothes on when she's gardening next spring and summer when the construction workers are here?